have a profound power on culture, attitude, and custom. They can influence or change the way people think about issues such as climate change or girls' education, which is why many women filmmakers in Africa are harnessing the power of film to challenge stereotypes against women. Hello everyone and welcome to Our Voices. I am Simanyishe Koye. Oriane Itangshaka is off today, but I'm in the studio with my co-host Amina Aliyu. Today we'll be talking about women filmmakers who are using their movies to influence social change in their communities. Hi Amina.
Hi Saminesh, how are you?
So I have seen a couple of Nigerian movies on Netflix that are made by women filmmakers and have strong women-led characters, like The Lionheart. I don't know if you have seen it.
I've seen it.
Yeah. So would you say the second largest movie industry in the world, the Nollywood, has given women filmmakers the space to be able to advocate for their cause?
Most certainly, but then women have always had a large presence in media in Nigeria anyway. When you look at Ebony Life TV, owned by Mo Abdu, it's one of the largest production companies that we have for Nollywood, and it's owned by Mo Abdu. She's a woman. When you look at literature, most of the books that I wrote, most of the exams that I had taken for my secondary school education were written by women.
Wow.
We have Chimamanda Adichie. She's
my favorite.
We've always been very popular in media in general.
Yes, yeah.
So that has always been an essential part of storytelling for
I
our
guess
culture.
we have so much to learn from Nigeria.
Of course you do.
The world has so much to learn from Nigeria. I mean, of course, we also have like successful directors, movie makers, women movie makers in the growing industry. For example, in Ethiopia, we have this Qedist Yilmaz. She's a very strong director who produced movies with women characters who challenge stereotypes in general. So that's what we are going to explore today. While women African filmmakers remain largely underrepresented in the growing African film industry, they still play an important role in revolutionizing how the world views women. Women screenwriters, producers, camera operators, actresses, and other film professionals use their talents to bring their stories to the screen and to advocate for positive social change that advances girls' and women's rights in the continent. From the multi-award-winning filmmakers Kukua Ishun, who raises issues on mental health, to Kimiondo Kuhinoho, the Los Angeles-based Ugandan playwright who made the first Ugandan film to ever qualify for an Oscar, African filmmakers are not only pointing their cameras to the issues that most impact women, but are serving as change agents promoting gender equality and equity. On this week's episode of Our Voices, we will discuss how women filmmakers in Africa are using the genre of film to shine a light on social, political, and human rights issues to promote activism and advocacy.
The founders of the Somali Digital Media Academy say women's involvement in the Mogadishu film industry is surging. Abdi Aziz Barrow spoke to some women who are contributing to the visual history of their country in this report from the Somali capital, narrated by Salem Solomon.
Hanan Abdulgadir Jamale is an aspiring filmmaker. She's one of many women leading the charge in the industry, and she has the support of organizations like the Somali Digital Media Academy, or SODMA. At a recent filmmaking seminar organized by SODMA, Jamale said she believed film could transform societal perceptions and create positive change.
These seminars are particularly beneficial as one learns how to film. During the process of filmmaking, the combination of audio and visual elements effectively conveys the intended message to the audience. Watching a film helps people comprehend the story in a way that they wouldn't if they had not seen the video.
One of the key ideas that drives Jamale's work is girls' education. Jamale says she hopes to inspire and empower young girls across Somalia.
I aim to raise awareness about the importance of educating girls, as there exists a part of society that believes a girl is incapable of learning and achieving great things. The community can be helped by the making of films that raise awareness and highlight the potential of girls to learn, work, and take charge of their lives.
Yusuf Abukar Ibrahim is the director of SODMA. He says that over 50 students attended this filmmaking training session and that the training makes a difference.
We are offering this training to provide an opportunity for unskilled youth living in the city to learn and gain an understanding of the skill.
He says a growing number of women like Jamale are entering the Mogadishu film industry and receiving advanced training in filmmaking.
During the training, we extensively cover topics related to cinematography, including its definition and functions and the tools used.
Ibrahim thinks that nurturing talents like Jamale and her peers can positively impact not only their lives, but also the broader community. For Abdulaziz Baro in Mogadishu, Somalia, Salim Salman, VOA News.
Thank you, Abdulaziz, for that report. Now let's meet one of the African women filmmakers from Zambia who is using her skills to promote the interests of African women. Known her for movies Frida, Kitchen Party, and Yashudhara, the Buddha's wife, Tisa Chigaga is a filmmaker whose work explores the themes of immigration, identity, and what it means to belong. In addition to writing for the screen, Chigaga also directs and produces short films of her own. In 2021, she moved to New York to study filmmaking at the Digital Film Academy. Chigaga is now joining us via Skype from the Big Apple. Chigaga, it's a pleasure to have you on our show.
Good morning, Simanesh. How are you doing? I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you so much. So I was reading about one of your movies, Frida. It's about undocumented immigrant who gets fired from her housekeeping work. From your experience, how important is movie to tell the stories of like what you did about immigrants, or it could be girls' education? How useful is a movie?
I find movies to be quite critical when it comes to these issues. Movies allow you to delve into more than just the surface of a topic. And I mean, when you look at what's going on in the world today, you look at what's going on in the southern border of the USA, you look at what's going on in the Mediterranean Sea, people are perishing. People are dying as they're trying to make their way to a better life. And the thing is, when these cases are reported, it's only the numbers. You only ever hear 40 dead here, 50 dead here, 60 apprehended at the border. But these are people. They're not just numbers. They're not just statistics. They are humans deserving of a better life and deserving of opportunities. And the thing about film is that it allows you to experience the humanity of these people. It takes these people from just being a statistic to being a real flesh and blood person. And how does it do this? It actually allows you to look past the exterior. It allows you to recognize them as people with their own ambitions, hopes, fears, dreams, desires, little quirks, little annoyances, likes and dislikes. And all these things go to show that actually, in the same way that we are people with this full spectrum of emotions and hopes and aspirations, they are people too. So if we would want to have a good life, why wouldn't they?
Most certainly. So, Tisa, when we talk about female or African female filmmakers, there's definitely not a shortage. The talent is there, but yet they're not as represented in the industry. What do you think the challenges are?
Oh, how much time do we have? I think off the top of my head, the first thing I would say is it all starts with perspective. People look at you as an African, as a person with black skin, with brown skin, and already they're underestimating you. They're looking at you and thinking, really, they don't even call you a woman. This girl, does she really have the capability to drive a production? Can she really handle things in the way that a man could handle things? I don't do that. And in that way, you're cut off from funding, you're cut off from production facilities. I mean, it can be a very, very patriarchal mindset that keeps women away from opportunities in film.
Yeah, despite those challenges, I'm happy to see people like you, female filmmakers like you, gaining success, thriving. Yeah, definitely. But there has, in the past, especially, women when the characters are built, there is a way that women are presented as maybe a wife or a daughter. But now with more filmmakers like yourself coming up, would you say that it's helping change the stereotyping and how the characters are being built?
Oh, absolutely. I think especially in the past, a lot of that was because it was men that were writing these characters. It was men that were shooting these characters. But as women, we know who we are. We know how multi-dimensional we are. We know how complex we are. And that translates when we put our pen to the paper to create these female characters. And so we're seeing a situation where women are being presented in film as being no less or not inferior to men. They're being able to shine in their own light. And I think this has the knock-on effect of also encouraging male filmmakers to do their best to do justice by the female characters. And so as we have more women putting their pen to paper and bringing women to life, it's also putting pressure on the men to keep up with the pace and make sure that they too are doing their part to represent women, African women especially, well in film.
So still on the topic of African women, we have other streaming services now like Netflix and Amazon. And how much influence would you say they have in propelling the careers of women? How much do they encourage the careers of women in that field from your own experience?
You know, from my own experience, I have seen that these big distributing organizations have given a platform to African filmmakers, especially women African filmmakers. But I would also encourage my fellow African women filmmakers to shine their eyes and, you know, try and look at perhaps platforms that might not immediately be obvious. For instance, I have a film coming up in a few weeks. It's called Kitchen Party, and it's already been picked up by a platform called Indie Films World. Indie Films World is a smaller platform. It's originally from Bollywood, but at this point, they're trying to, you know, develop content from all around the world. And it's such a fascinating topic in which, you know, it's a Bollywood distributor that's giving me, an African woman, an opportunity to showcase my film. And so I would say that the world is opening up, and I would encourage my fellow female filmmakers to try and look at what is not...
To really shine their eye, because you also have to be willing to take on the opportunity.
Shine your eyes,
certainly. Well, yeah, thank you so much. So this was Tisa Chigaga. She's a Zambian filmmaker who is currently based in New York. Thank you so much for joining us, Tisa.
Oh, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
It's now time for a break. When we return, we will meet Zuriel Oduwole, a filmmaker and global advocate for girls' education in Africa, and continue our discussion on the power of women behind and on the camera. We would also love to hear from you on our social media platforms. We are on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and our handle is @VOA Africa. Use the hashtag VOA Our Voices. We are also on WhatsApp, and our number is US country code +1 202 503 9025. We'll be right back.
In times of change, when the world seems uncertain, and what we hear doesn't reflect what we see, we seek the truth. When we are told only part of the story, we lose trust. In moments of crisis, our dreams, hopes, and wishes for a better tomorrow depends on a free press. At Voice of America, we bring you the stories that people take risks to see. We connect the world and unite it with truth. At Voice of America, we show you the whole picture.
Health, wellness, sport, beauty, medical breakthroughs. Healthy Living cares about your well-being. What are the main health concerns in Africa and around the world? Find out the latest on coronavirus. Connect with our experts and ask them questions.
How long does the virus stay?
Join me, Lina Khmoudou, in Washington, every week on Healthy Living, right here on VOA.
Welcome back. You are watching Our Voices, and we are discussing how female African filmmakers are using film as a means to advocate for social change. To learn more about the influence of their work, we spoke to film professionals from Kampala, Uganda. We have Nana Kaga, a filmmaker and actress, Isabella Kabera, cinematographer, and Sheila Naziwa, TV producer and director in Your Voice segment.
My name is Nana Kaga. I am a filmmaker based in Kampala, Uganda. I do film that actually resonates with the African woman and the issues that she faces, whether to marry both our cultures and the Western world that's encroached on us, and how to actually find their place in the world. I've been inspired by, and I know this is really cliched, Steven Spielberg. And the film that I'm inspired by is Bridges of Madison County with Meryl Streep. The power she portrays in there of a woman struggling with the choices that she's made, I think, is every woman's story. Whether you're black, white, Asian, it's all our story.
My name is Catherine Isabel Kabera, a filmmaker from Uganda, Kampala. I do specifically cinematography, sound, and directing. And I was inspired by Francis Ford, the director of The Godfather. I really liked how he managed to put together the story and how he came up with the actors and the storyline all together.
My name is Sheila Naziwa, a producer and a director. I'm inspired by a movie called Sisters. Sisters was directed by an African American called Tyler Perry. I love Tyler Perry's movies.
We have another guest joining us from California via Skype. Nigerian-American Zuriel Oduwole is a documentary filmmaker, development advisor, and girls' education advocate. Since making her first documentary at just only 6 years old for a history competition, Zuriel has created several movies covering a variety of topics, such as the power of education, the 2014 FIFA World Cup, and the work of Nelson Mandela. Zuriel is also a founder of Dream Up, Speak Up, Stand Up, a charity foundation that helps encourage girls to stay in school and achieve their dreams through education. Zuriel, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Good morning from Los Angeles. I'm happy to be here.
Excited to have you. So Zuriel, I've heard an infamous story about you regarding an East African country where you went and you met, you went to a village, and the chief of that village had been trying to meet one of the 30-odd leaders world leaders that you had met, and you told him that it was through education that you met those leaders, and so he told you, go ahead, teach all the girls here education, and you went straight to algebra.
Oh, I did. I remember that story. I think that was Namibia you're talking about.
Yes, Namibia.
Oh, yeah, I was 13. That was, wow, 8 years ago. But yeah, that's just like an example of some of the work that I do. I mean, you mentioned I'm a filmmaker. One of my biggest passions, though, is also girls' education. And so that's kind of what I focus on whenever I'm traveling, and even through part of my documentaries, you know, the power of education and providing our girls the opportunity to learn and have that education so that when they get older, they have more opportunities in life. I mean, you mentioning that story is just one of our, you know, success stories. Another one's in Mozambique. I met with President Felipe Nyusi just to talk to him about the power of education and sending their girls to school. And, you know, one of the biggest barriers was child marriage, because this country had a very high rate of girl marriage back in 2018 when I met him. So I sat down, talked to him about it as a girl. And, you know, 18 months or 16 months later, with the help of many other voices, the country formally outlawed child marriage. And so that's just like the work that, you know, I do in girls' education advocacy. And that Namibia example, it's so good to hear it again. It's been so long, but that was such an amazing time.
That's so beautiful to hear. And you started making documentary at the age of 6 when you were still young. And as Amina said, you met over 30 world leaders, which is remarkable for someone who is as young as you are. So how do you bring the, you know, your movie making career and also your advocacy work? How do you use the two together to promote some of the issues like girls' education?
That's a very good question. I mean, so I made my first film when I was 9 years old, but that's okay. It's just like 6 turns upside down. And so whenever I make films, usually it's for one of three reasons. I'm usually making it to tell untold stories, just because I truly believe that it's so important that we record and document history and make sure that we get history and those messages out to as many people as possible. I also tell positive stories, just because I feel like if you turn on the news, if you open a newspaper, there are so many negative things going on in the world that sometimes it's nice to be reminded of the positive things that are out there. And the last reason why I make these documentaries is to bring awareness to certain issues. So as a girls' education advocate, naturally, when I produce some documentaries, I can use that to shed light on the issue of girls' education, on the challenges that many girls around the world, especially on the African continent, face, whether it's child marriage, economic reasons, like just different barriers that stop girls from going to school. And so filmmaking is actually how I started. Like you mentioned, that History Channel competition when I was 9 years old, but it's kind of graduated to now a platform which I use to bring awareness to girls' education around the world.
Excellent. So do you see film as a game changer per se with regards to giving more African women a voice to speak in their communities?
Absolutely. I mean, not even just for African women, for women all over the world. I mean, one of the things that I do as a filmmaker is I started a basic filmmaking workshop when I was 13 years old. And basically with it, I taught, the first class, 25 young women, I taught them simple editing skills, how to hold a camera, lighting, those types of things. And it was just to give them the opportunity to learn a skill which they could use to tell their own voices, tell their community's voices, and even maybe make a living from. From that first film workshop, just 9 months after it, one of the young women who attended, she went out, she borrowed a camera, she borrowed some money, and she made her own documentary, which she shopped around the TV networks in her area. And that documentary was telling the story of her community. So I feel like, especially the way the world's going now with social media, there's so many platforms which you can use to get your video out there, to get your film out there. And, if you look back 15, 20 years ago, if you wanted to reach an audience of 1,000 people, you would have to walk into a physical room with 1,000 people in there to tell your story. But now, like, if you have a camera and you have an idea, you have a passion, and more importantly, if you have a voice, if you use your voice, you can get your story to millions around the world. So I do believe that for women everywhere, it truly, truly is a game changer.
Mm-hmm. You are not only a filmmaker, as you just described. You use film making as a tool to empower other young people who are either out of school or who are unemployed. So what is your advice to help encourage other women who want to be in the industry, who want to be filmmakers? What's your tip for that? What do they need?
Well, from the experiences and what I've seen, as a young American, the film workshop that I've done so far, we've done it now in 7 countries. So we've done it in places like Ethiopia, Rwanda, Mexico, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire. And what I've seen is that there's so much passion and there's so much drive in a lot of the youth, and especially in a lot of women across the African continent. And I think the most important thing is remembering that each of us have a voice, and it's a gift that we've been given. So whenever we have the opportunity, whether it's through film, like as I'm doing, it's just to use that voice to bring awareness to challenges around us. It's not just about our stories, but as much as they're important to get out, but also using film to tell the stories of those who maybe can't tell their own stories, using film to, tell the stories of our communities. So I think it's just so important that we use our voices and we use, our experience to just get those stories out there to people all over the world.
So Zuriel, what tips could you share with upcoming filmmakers as to how to get their message directly to their audience?
Well, like I talked about a bit earlier, now with just how social media is, like that's one of the easiest ways to get your video, to get your film, to get your voice out there, right? Because if you sit down, you make a video, you put it on Instagram, TikTok, etc., you will reach such a large global audience. So just coming back down to the film aspect of it, the first thing is to have a story. Whether it's your story or your community story, you have to have a story that you want to tell, a story that you really want to get out there. And something else that I would say as well, I mean, just how the film industry is, transforming now with so many more streaming platforms. There are so many different avenues and so many more opportunities now to get our videos, to get our films out there, whether, it's through streaming services or like the typical studio productions or even smaller studios. There's so many avenues to get your film out there. So the first thing is to have a story. And, something I always say is to have dreams, because filmmaking, for me, it was a dream. It's something I started younger, but through my dreams and my passions, I grew it to, you know, what it is now. And so it's so important to have dreams. I always say it doesn't cost to have dreams, you know, just to think of an idea. You don't have to like cash in a check or like swipe a credit card. It's free to dream. So have those dreams, have those passions, and then use your voice, you know, to get your story out there.
Thank you so much for that advice. And thank you so much, Zuriel Oduwole, for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Zuriel Oduwole is a documentary filmmaker, and we also had Tisa Chigaga earlier. We thank both our guests. And that's our show for today. We'll see you again next week with another exciting program. Be sure to continue the conversation on our social media platforms. Until then, thanks for watching.